Do you have rusty calipers?
Ugly blue caliper. That's just painted on the front.
Shows through your wheels and it bugs you? Yeah, so do I. Sometimes your calipers just get looking kind of rusty and they just don't look good. So what you can do is just repaint them. And I'm going to show you sort of what to do and some of what not to do. Stick around. So the tools we're going to be using today is a socket and possibly an extension. A 14 mil socket and a 17 mil socket just to pull the brake calipers off. A couple of twist ties to tie up the calipers, although anything will work just to tie up the calipers, a little piece of string or whatever. Then I'm going to use some PB blastage on the bolts just to make sure they come off easy. We're going to be using this red caliper paint. I'm also going to use a wire brush and some sandpaper just to try to get any sort of roughness or rust or any sort of contaminants off the caliper themselves and the bracket. So there you have it. So the first thing you're going to do about 15-20 minutes before you want to start this job is just to get the good old PB blastage out and soak down these bolts so they come loose. You don't need to use a ton. But there's one caliper bolt up here. This is going to be really the same as changing your brakes. So we're going to do one caliper bolt down here and one there. And then the two bracket bolts as well. And they're right there. So easy enough to see. So then we're going to wait probably 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then we're going to go back and we're going to bust those bolts loose and take off the caliper. So we'll just start by go ahead and loosening and removing these caliper bolts. That one broke loose pretty easy. Let's get the rest of these. This caliper should come off pretty easy now. And it does. So here's my caliper. Someone tried to paint it blue, and they just kind of hit the outside. It looks like they got the pads, but they left the tape on there. So that's at least something, but they did get the little bit of blue overspray on the pads. But at least they kind of taped it off. Something. But I'm going to basically, so when you go to paint your calipers, don't leave them on the car. Take them off the car. It's literally 4 bolts. Don't leave them on the car. Take them off the car. It literally is going to take an extra 10 or 20 minutes to take them off. And then you'll be able to spray the whole thing and do kind of what's right instead of the minimum. So I'm going to take these bracket bolts off and we'll get to refinishing these calipers. So like I said, this whole process will pretty much work on any car. Now that I've got the caliper off, I'm just going to hang it off my strut. I got some holes in the strut here. This isn't necessarily have to be for only Subarus. This will work for anything. But we're gonna have this caliper here, so we can easily paint that once we get this bracket bolt out. So anyhow, there you go. Now I'm gonna pull those bracket bolts. All right, here comes the hard part with the bracket bolts. Do not remove these completely. Start on one, break it loose, and then break loose the other one, then remove the bolts. Otherwise, you could have a bad time. And it's not. There we go. And that came off real easy. So that's about as far as I'm going to go before I hit the top one here. And I need the extension for this one because it's hitting the strut bolt. So we're gonna should be good. Yep. And it broke loose very easy too. That's what PB Blastage does. So now that the caliper bracket is off and the caliper is off, we're ready to get them ready for paint. Since this one has blue paint on the outside, it's not going to be too bad. This caliper doesn't look incredible. In fact, I bet you I'll be replacing this not too long, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's very rusty inside this bracket. So I wouldn't be surprised if this one actually failed at some point. Anywho, we'll be back at you for the prep of the caliper. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is brake clean it. It's got a lot of grease and grunge, so I'm going to get some brake clean, and I'm going to clean it up as best I can. And then I'm going to hit it with the wire brush. You know, just try to scuff it up and try to get some of the gunge off of it. Just going to use a scrap of something here. Use a scrap, just try to get some of this off. Should probably get a rag. So then now that it's kind of been sprayed down, I'm just going to hit it with the wire brush and try to get everything else off that I can. And you can see a lot coming off with just the wire brush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some tape, and I'm going to tape around the rubber boots here, but everything else is going to get sprayed red. And also the ends of those bolt holes I'm probably going to do, but everything else is going to get sprayed red. So there you go. For the other half of the caliper that's hanging on the car, I'm just going to run a quick wire brush over it as best I can. It's in pretty good shape. I may put some brake cleaner on it and hit it with the wire brush and call it good. It's already got paint on there, so hopefully I can just sort of scuff it up and it'll kind of go on pretty easy. So I got the boots taped off so they won't get overspray on them, and now it's pretty much ready to get some paint, and so we'll see how it goes. Wish me luck. And you want to do light coats, and this wasn't shaking well enough, you can tell already by the way it's coming out. You want to go light coats, do a few of them. We'll see how good my painting skills are. Probably not very, honestly. But we'll leave that for a second, and then we'll flip it over and we'll get the rest that I didn't do, and then we'll keep going. So for this side, for the actual caliper, I'm just gonna kind of hold it up, and I'm just gonna kind of brush off all the bullshit. Try to clean it up as best I can without, you could take it off the car, but I'm not gonna bother in this case. I don't feel like bleeding the brakes. So I'm just going to clean it up as best I can, but you can see there's a lot of crap coming off of it. But it'll all look a lot better when it's done. And then when I'm done doing this, I'm going to tape around the boots. So I want to be pretty careful about overspray, so I'm just draping this piece of material over the rotor and hub assembly, and then I taped off the pistons. So basically we're going to do the same thing as the caliper up on the bench, and we're just going to do some light coats here. And then we're gonna let it to sit for a minute. And then I'll flip it around and I'll paint some of the other spots. And then we'll keep going. So here's the finished caliper. I'll probably do one more coat and then it's just gonna go back on the car. So, but anyways, it's pretty much like 3 coats. I can see a couple of spots that could use a little psst, psst. It looks pretty decent. So this will end up going back on the car real soon. So here's the final product with the pads loaded back into the caliper bracket with the little shims that are greased for the pads so the pads can move freely. And we'll put it back on the car, and that's about the size of it. It's not perfect, but it looks a lot better than it did. You could clear it, make it super shiny if you really want to try to do a super good job, but this, you know, this is going to make it look a lot better than it was. It definitely made a difference here. So basically we're just tightening the bolts back up for the caliper. And then once that's done, we'll throw this piece of the caliper back on. So this is the final product, or at least as far as I'm going to go. You could go further or add more coats of paint or add clear coat or any number of things. But here's my final product. If you got suggestions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks for watching this episode of Driveway Subarus.